Facebook and Instagram. So our next talk is going to be on temperament and why it's important to cattle producers. I'm going to preface some of this by, and I made some of these comments the other day as I was putting my thoughts together for today. I made some of these comments in the news update. There's a lot of things that we talk about through extension work that I think some commercial cattlemen may kind of fall on deaf ears. Some of the things you think, well, I don't need to do that on my place, or it's not going to be economical on my place. That's not going to save me any money. Y'all, if you are in this business to try to be profitable, some of the things that we talk about now have a lot of legitimacy. Go price farm diesel. Go price fertilizer. Go price equipment. Go price implements. And we got a good friend of mine, Steve Roberts, works for PTI. That man has got a hard job right now. And just trying to sell that equipment, it's high. Cattle producers don't have a lot of extra money in their pocket right now just from trying to grow grass this summer. And we had fertilizer prices that went up 300% increases from last year. Well, guess what we have to depend on to feed our cattle in Louisiana? Grass. All right, so a lot of those things that we talk about now, if we can help save you $7, $8, $9, $10 per head, that's $7 or $8, $9, $10 in your pockets that you may not have had before. And that's one of those things in terms of temperament. And in a good year, whenever cattle, you can go to the sale barn and sell a weaned calf for $900 to $1,000 a head. You can go put out fertilizer on your fields for $25 an acre. In those kind of years, these kind of things may not be as important. I think they're always important, but they may not be as important to some of you. But now, whenever we're talking about temperament, and the reason I think it's important for us to talk about temperament is, number one, is safety. The average age of the cattlemen in the state of Louisiana is in the 60s, 62 to 64 years old. All right? Don't move quite as quick as we used to. So number one is just farm safety in terms of that disposition or temperament of those that cow herd. Number two, Dr. Brantley just spent a good bit of time talking about immune responses in terms of vaccines. We know through research that those animals that have high cortisol or epinephrine levels in their blood, that means that they're more flighty, they're more excitable, they have higher cortisol and epinephrine levels in their blood, have a lower immune response. So what that means is we're going to go spend $5 a head on a vaccine. We're going to put them through a chute, we're going to run them into the chute, and we're going to give a vaccine. So if we have a higher number of excitable, poor disposition animals in that herd, we're going to get a lower immune response to that vaccine that we just spent $5 on. All right. The next thing is in terms of lower average daily gains, lower feed efficiency, and lower carcass merit. All right. How many of y'all know somebody, you know somebody over the past 2 years that have started selling beef on farm? How many of y'all know somebody? Show of hands. Absolutely. It has become a very, very popular, I still call it a niche market because I don't know that it's that widespread to call it just a standard market, but it is a very good way that cattlemen have increased or added a little profitability to their farm. It's through selling that on-farm beef. So if we're selling on-farm beef, we're trying to market a product that we want to be proud of, right? So if we've got cattle, weaned calves, yearling calves that we're putting into our meat side of our operation, and we've got some really poor dispositions in there, we know that we're going to have a lesser carcass value to those animals that are got a poor disposition. All right, and what we're talking about in terms of is we're talking about marbling. So you can read the research. I've got it documented in here. You can go read it for yourself. What we're talking about is more of those cattle that have poor disposition, more of those yearlings that have poor disposition are going to have lesser marbling. All right, so they're going to grade select and standard instead of where we want them at. We want them to grade choice. Right, that's that higher eating experience is when we can get that choice beef. Okay, so that's why I think today why it's important for us to talk about temperament. We're gonna as we get done with this and we talk about ways that we measure temperament. Myself and Vince, we're going to get in here and try to show you a little bit. We'll get everybody up here and we'll try to work them on the back side of the fence back there. They're not going to come up here. But why we want to talk about doing some of these scores, and it's all through the Beef Improvement Federation. I've got the charts in here for you where you can do pen scores and chute scores. You can actually score them whenever they're in the chute, or you can score them in the pen. Some of the advantages and disadvantages of those as we go through this. So what is temperament? The reactivity or fear response to humans. So y'all have heard us talk about low stress handling. Y'all have probably watched Temple Grandin or Ron Gill, some of those guys and ladies that have been in the forefront of low stress handling. You might have heard that referred to as a flight zone. And some cattle are going to have a smaller flight zone than other cattle. But it's just that when we talk about temperament, it's that fear response to humans or some sort of novel environment that's out there that is causing that animal to show that response. Okay, so we call it a fight or flight type of response. And the reason that cattle react that way is because they are a prey species. Whenever we say a prey species, we are trying to eat them. We are a human. All right, we are trying to prey on them, and that's the way that they perceive us, is because they are a prey species, and that's just the way they act. So the way cattle react to threats, humans, fearful situation, or novel stressful environment is considered that temperament that we're going to be talking about today. So why is that important to you, and why is it important to the beef cattle industry? So we talked about a couple of those already, of why it's important to you: risk of injury to handlers or to cattle. All right, every one of us could probably go around this area right here today and talk about at some point where we know somebody that's been hurt, some of those very bad injuries whenever they're working cattle. All right, we all know some of those are never even reported. Some of those, whenever they go to the emergency room, those are actually reported as farm incidents. All right, back in the like the early 2000s, I think they quit doing that report. I think the last one that came out was like 2007 or 2008, somewhere around in there. Well, they actually reported farm incidents, but they took that a step further and they actually reported whether there was a livestock related incident. Was it a equipment related incident? All right. Now they're just reported as farm incidents. All right, so we really don't know if there was livestock involved or not. But we could all probably talk about those, and a lot of times if we can just try to manage some of the temperament in our herds, then maybe we can reduce some of those injuries. Reduced feed intake, reduced growth rates or average daily gains, lesser carcass quality, and reduced response to vaccination or immune function, all of those that I just mentioned to you. So I think it's important for us to just stop and think about some of the normal production practices that we do on our farms every year, sometimes twice a year, of where we can actually measure some of these. So the normal practices, whenever we're weaning, whenever we're ear tagging, whenever we're branding, whenever we're castrating, vaccinating, social mixing, transporting. Boy, that just didn't come out right at all. And all of those are stressful environments that we're putting those animals into, to where we can stop and we can measure some of these things that we're going to talk about here in just a second. So how do we evaluate cattle for temperament? So I mentioned some of them already. So we can do pen scores. We'll talk about some of those advantages and disadvantages in just a second. Chute scores and exit velocity. So I'm going to digress for here just a minute. So Lee is standing over here somewhere. There's Lee. So Lee will understand this because Lee actually worked with Dr. Sid DeRuin for a little while at the Hill Farm. So Dr. Sid DeRuin was our beef cattle researcher at the Hill Farm whenever I started working for the Extension Service in Claiborne Parish. I had the opportunity to go out and work with Sid a little bit, and that was the first experience that I had. I came off a commercial beef cow farm in the Piney Hills of Claiborne Parish. Whenever I heard Dr. DeRuin start talking about exit velocity and using barrel racing timers to measure the velocity of these tiger stripe cows coming out of a squeeze chute, I went to scratching my head thinking, oh my gosh, what in the world are we doing? So that was my first experience, and they actually built a chute. And Lee, you can tell me, I don't know if it was Stephen or who built the chute. Was it Stephen who built the chute there? The alley coming out of the chute, and actually built little brackets in there. Dr. Edwards has been using them a little bit on our heifer program now. Built little brackets in there that we could put those barrel racing timers in there so we could measure the speed that it took to travel 6 foot. All right, so that was my first experience, and that was 1996, 1997. That was my first experience with exit velocity of coming out of a chute. So this is not an old philosophy, or not a new philosophy. This is an old philosophy. There's been a lot of research. Texas A&M has done a great deal of research, along with Mississippi State. There's some scientists at both of those universities that have done a good bit of work with that. So some of these are subjective, some of them are objective. So the subjective scores are going to be the pin score and the chute score. All right, the objective score is going to be that exit velocity because we're actually recording not an abstract, but a very objective number that's assigned to that in terms of the speed that it takes that animal to exit the chute. So the pin scores and the chute scores are going to be subjective. So that's kind of like whenever we talk about body condition scoring our cow herd. All right, those are subjective scores because it's your opinion, it's Johnny's opinion, and it's one man's opinion of what that score should be. So whenever we're assigning pin scores and chute scores, it's the same thing. It's going to be a subjective. So it's just going to be my opinion, your opinion. So that's whenever we talk about, and that's why we're going to go out there in just a minute. So it's two handlers that are going out there in the pen to do a pin score, and you're both going to assign a score, and you're going to average those two together. All right. That's why whenever we talk about doing body condition scores, it's important that you don't body condition score your own cattle. Bring in a neighbor or somebody else that you are confident with that can help you do those body condition scores, because most of the time you're going to be harder on your cattle than what somebody else may be. So while chute and pin scores are subjective measurements of temperament, exit velocity is our objective measurement that records the rate at which the cattle exit the working chute. The pin score is a subjective measurement in which cattle are separated into small groups. So we've got our small group out here. We're trying to use about 3 to 5. We're going to put them into a pen. Ideally, we would want to put them in a pen, and this is what Beef Improvement Federation says, a pen about 24 by 24. You're going to use 2 handlers to go out there and assign those pin scores. So the chute scores reflect the behavior of the animal while confined in the chute without the squeeze. So you're going to put them in the chute, catch the head, but you're not going to apply the squeeze, and you're going to assign that score to them. So those were originally identified by Dr. Temple Grandin, who I'm sure all of y'all have heard that name. And then utilization of a temperament score, which is the average of exit velocity and pin score, provides a combined temperament measurement. So whenever we assign on a research scale in terms of what that temperament score is, we're averaging that exit velocity and that pin score. So let's talk about the two that are going to be more applicable to our cow-calf operations, and that's pin score and chute score. I don't expect anybody to go out and buy a set of barrel racing timers and build you a contraption on the front of your chute in order to take exit velocity. That's not where I'm at, y'all. I'm not that naive, trust me. But I think we can all do a better job in terms of pin scores and chute scores. So the first one I've got up here is chute scores, because for any type of our normal production management practices that we're taking place on our farm in terms of branding, castrating, vaccinating, we're putting them through a chute, right? So why would it be that hard to go ahead and assign a chute score to those animals, right? So the ideal time to do that is at weaning, all right? We're going to take those weaned animals. Is it too loud? So it's this one right here. Is that better? Is that better? I didn't know I was screaming at y'all. I'm sorry. I'm about hard of hearing. Is that better? Okay. So we're putting them through a chute anyway, so why can we not go ahead and assign a chute score? A pen score is going to require us to handle those animals again. All right. So, I mean, I understand this concept. We're trying to minimize the number of times that we get them up. Mr. John, that's the argument we always have whenever we talk about AI and synchronization, right? We got to put them through the chute again. So it's a little bit more labor. It's a little bit more time to get them up, and we run them through that chute. So the pen scores is just another time that we've got to handle them and move them around. The chute score, we're already putting them in there. So whenever we're got a group of heifers, if you retain your own heifers and you use them as your replacements, why not go ahead and assign a score to them, and those that do not match, if you go ahead and set you some baselines for your operation in terms of what are you willing to tolerate in terms of chute scores, and if you want to take it a step further and do pen scores, then don't keep those that are scoring up there in the 5s and 6s, don't keep them for replacement females, right? And the reason being is because temperament traits are moderately heritable. So 0.4 to 0.6 on a scale of 0 to 1, temperament traits score at a 0.4 to 0.6. That's moderately heritable, right? So why would we want to keep those females in our cow herd if they're going to have lesser immune response, they're going to have lesser carcass quality, and they're going to have lesser feed efficiency? Why would we want to keep those? All right, so let's divert those females. We're still going to make money on them. Let's divert them out of our replacement heifer program and move them over to our marketing side and market them with our steers. All right? Don't try to keep them in that herd because they are going to cost you money. And that's what this is all about. All right? I hope anybody that has ever heard me talk anything about cattle in the past, I hope you understand that all I want to see is profitability and sustainability in our cow-calf industry in this region. All right, that's what we're trying to do. So we're recommended that we do that docility score, that pen score, that chute score, at weaning. That's the best time to do it. And that way you still got options of which way you can go with those animals. So advantages, easy to do during routine handling. We're putting them through the chute, easy to do. It is positively correlated with other measurements of temperament. All right, so positively correlated with pen scores, positively correlated with exit velocity. All right, so that's a really good guideline, a really good score that we can apply. So the disadvantage is it's not correlated with the cortisol levels in the blood. Those two are not correlated, all right? So we'll look at some in just a minute that are correlated, but that particular score, according to research, is not directly correlated to the cortisol levels in the blood. So the next one, pen score guidelines. So the pen score should be evaluated again at or near weaning. So we're trying to put together a group of calves, trying to get as close to 5 calves, 5 heifers, replacement heifers as we can. Pen in a small lot. So I told you ideally 24 by 24 and approached by 2 handlers. Okay, so that's ideally how we're going to do that. So those advantages, so this one is correlated with the cortisol and the epinephrine levels in the blood. It is also correlated with the other measurements of temperament, exit velocity, and chute score. And then repeated measurements are correlated with each other and correlated to that cortisol. So the disadvantages, what I said already. we got to move them again. We got to move them into a pen. We got to sort them out into smaller groups. It takes a little bit more time to do it, all right? So that is one of the disadvantages that there would be, all right? So you can see that score, those scores, that table that you saw on the shoot score and also on the pen score, those are taken directly from the Beef Improvement Federation, all right? So you can use those, set you some benchmarks of where you think that your cattle need to be, and then start using that. So the last one there, the one that I think is going to be the least likely to be used, but we got to put it in here because it is one of the components that we use, is exit velocity or flight speed. So that exit velocity is time in feet per second that it takes the calf to travel 6 feet. You got a picture there of how we do that in a research setting. So we won't talk about that one a whole lot. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that that is one of the things that we do use. So if you flip over there to that summary side, let's try to wrap this up, and then we'll step in there and see if we can't show you what we're talking about in terms of trying to collect some of these pen scores and just trying to identify some of those animals that are in that 1s, 2s, and 3s that are not trying to just run over you. They're not jumping into the fence. They're not trying to jump over the fence. They're not trying to be aggressive towards the handler and things like that. So in summary, excitable animals have an elevated concentration of stress hormones. All right, those stress hormones, cortisol, epinephrine, throughout their lifetime, which negatively impact growth performance, carcass traits. So again, those carcass traits, quality grade, tenderness, and marbling, they have a negatively impact on response to vaccination, and they also have immune challenges throughout their lifetime. In a feedlot, so we didn't talk a whole lot about feedlot, but we have to remember that the calves that we're growing here and selling as weaned calves, y'all, that's where they're ending up at, okay? So we have to talk about how those cattle are also reacting in the feedlot. These excitable cattle will tend to have lower average daily gains. All right, so if you have ever put cattle in a feedlot, you know that lower average daily gains are not your friend. All right, we need those average daily gains to be up there 3.5 pounds a day in order for us to make them remain profitable. They have lower carcass weights and increased treatment costs, resulting in lower net profits to that producer. So we have to remember, we talked a lot about today just in terms of our commercial operations or seed stock operations, but we have to remember that we have to carry that down the road to the feedlot as well. Some breed associations are tracking and providing temperament scores. So if you go look at Simmentals, if you go look at Angus, if you go look at Brahmins, all of them are providing you with some EPDs in terms of temperament. All right, I think that is just going to continue to grow. I feel like some of the Charolais, the Herefords, they're not going to be too far behind. Matter of fact, I think the Herefords already have done it. But some of these others that we're using widely, I think they're going to continue to move that. So you can look at some of those breed associations and you can actually gather what some of their benchmarks are for that breed in terms of temperament scores. Commercial companies are providing genetic markers for temperament in conjunction with other markers such as tenderness. The Brahma breed has done an outstanding job of this in terms of using some of those genetic markers for tenderness. They use a shear test. And the Brahma breed has done an outstanding job of trying to increase some of that tenderness, and you can take some of that and directly correlate it back to temperament. Temperament is moderately heritable. We've already said that one time, so remember it's a 0.4 to 0.6 on a scale of 0 to 1 in terms of heritability. Therefore, elimination of the most temperamental cattle from the breeding herd will improve performance of the herd. All right, it's not an if. It will improve that performance. So identification of these temperamental calves or yearlings can be utilized to a producer's advantage in that these animals can be marketed or directed towards whichever way that particular temperament best makes you money. So if we can keep them in a shoot score of a 1, 2, or 3, and we know that she meets all of the other criteria for us for a replacement female, we keep her in our replacement program. If that temperament is up there in a 5 and 6, And we know that we don't want to keep that type of heritability in our herd. We move them over to the marketing side, and we market them for either meat if we got a meat program, or we market them with our steers. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I would like to say that as far as exit velocity,
Yes, sir.
I own the world champion.
You got one she can move out quick, huh? Yeah, I mentioned our heifer development program, so Lee is a big part of that. Dr. Edwards there at the Hill Farm is where we're conducting that at, and that's some of these things that we're talking about today. We're actually going to be capturing that information on those heifers that are in our heifer development program that we're doing at the Hill Farm. We'll actually be conducting pen scores, we'll be assigning chute scores, and we're actually collecting that exit velocity so that we can give all of that information back to that producer through that heifer development program. So Vince, if you'll come on in here. So whenever we're conducting pen scores, all we're trying to do is we're trying to see how the cattle react to human response. All right, so let's talk about a couple of things just in terms of how cattle react. All right, so the environment that they're in right now, they're automatically going to have a higher stress level because number one, there's a whole lot of people in here that they're not used to. They got two handlers in the pen with them that they're also not used to. All right, so a lot of what we're going to talk about now is going to be very subjective, right? Because there's a lot of different environmental stressors right now that are taking place that they're trying to react to. All right, so the pen scores that we might assign, that Vince and I might assign on these females may not be the same, where if it was Vince and a person who regularly helps him on his farm, if they were in a pen like this, it's Vince and another person that those cattle are used to, they're accustomed to, that pen score may be very different. Does that make sense? All right, so there's a whole lot of things that we got to consider in terms of. All right, so whenever we talk about aggressiveness, all right, so let's talk about those first. We got moderately aggressive, slightly aggressive, moderately aggressive, and aggressive. So the first thing that you can look at, so runs along the fences, will stand in the corner if humans stay away, may pace the fence, all right?
770, very aggressive.
Yeah, Vince has already got her tag number. All right, so if they just want to stand in the corner, so if we ease up a little bit, and they just want to try to stand in the corner, they're not, they just kind of want to stay away from us as humans, we're going to probably be in that 2 or 3 if they run along the fence. So the one that's already come out, 770, she's got the paint on her side. So 770 is the one that's already come by us one time running the fence. So we're probably going to be in a 3 or 4 for her. All right? So, and you just got to be able to get into the pen with them, work them around, apply a little pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Vince to stand, if you'll stand right over here, Vince.
Yeah, that's too far from the fence.
Yeah. I'm going to just ease in, and we're going to see if we just can't work some of them, see if they'll pass by Vince without being very aggressive. All right, we're going to see how fast Vince can go to that side of the pen. All right, so now we're just going to let them settle, see if they stand in the fence or see if stand in the corner or see if they're going to continue to run the fence. 770's thinking about again, she's thinking again about running that fence. So again, they get in the corner, all right? So other than 770, I would apply a score probably a 2 or 3 on every one of these. All right, in a different situation, they would probably be even lower than that. 770 would probably be in the middle of the range. So it would probably be around a 4. Okay? So there's nothing in here that is going to be a 5. Nothing that's actually coming at you wanting to fight. All right? It's those that you think are just going to bluff you, but they're really not bluffing. There's nothing in here that's trying to do that. So we don't have anything that's going to be on the higher end of that scale. Every one of you probably have cattle in your herds that would probably fit that 4 or 5. Lee Falk says those are hard to get rid of because they give him a calf every year. So he has a hard time getting rid of those. I got tickled back, what's it been whenever Brian got hurt, Lee? About a year ago. And they had warned him about this cow. Whenever she has a calf, she gets a little bit irritable. She gets a little bit more aggressive. And some of those cows are going to do that. They're going to have a little bit more aggressiveness to them whenever they get that calf on the ground. Well, Mark went out there to tag, and sure enough, he didn't pay attention to where she was at the time, and he ended up with a broke collarbone. So we all know that we can have those instances, but hopefully you can try to get an idea. Vince, do you see anything in here that you would give a 4 or 5 to?
No.
Other than 770?
She might be 8.
She wants
At any given time.
Yeah.
She might fight you now.
Yeah, she acts like she would. All right. Any questions, comments?